Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, April 8th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dahr Jamail, journalist, author. His latest, The End of Ice, bearing witness and finding meaning in the path of climate disruption. Also on the program today, Kirsten Nielsen quits the DHS to spend more time separating families. Meanwhile, Trump administration needs 2 years to reunite those separated kids with their parents. Trump administration designates the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And Obama refuses to turn the page on his disastrous political posture of the past. And welcome our upcoming constitutional crisis, which will involve Trump's taxes. Meanwhile, Bernie calls for re-enfranchising felony prisoners. U.S. troops pull out of Libya as violence rises. The Israeli elections are tomorrow. And lastly, dozens of administration whistleblowers have been revealed to be working with the House Democratic Oversight Committee. That could be interesting. All this and more on today's program. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This week, a little bit of house cleaning. We're managing a daycare center here too. We're trying to develop all sorts of revenue streams at the program at the moment. Speaking of revenue streams, I will be heading to Vegas this week to ostensibly cover the tort lawyer conference, but in actuality, parlaying some of your support of this program into an ability to get a brand new set of cameras, and I've got it down this time. I'm gonna make it work. But I will be in Vegas on Thursday and Friday, interviewing tort lawyers about various topics that are out there. I don't really usually know who I'm going to be interviewing until I get there. There are a couple of cases about trafficking, apparently, that some tort lawyers are working on. But I'll have a better sense of who I'm going to be interviewing when I get down there. So just a heads up on that. Meanwhile, is it Kirsten Nielsen? I mean, this is probably the last time I'm ever going to say her name, Kirsten. I guess, or Kirsten. Kirsten Nielsen. There's two things that. Is it Nielsen? Nielsen, sorry.
It's not important.
Yeah, I mean, the real reason why you should know her name is because she's a horrible human being. And we have seen her testimony, multiple committees over the years, and there should be no reformation for people like this. This is it. Their careers have been locked in. She can find a job, obviously, in some corporate structure. but these people, they need to be held to account. There is no leaving the Trump administration and getting a clean pass. There is no, it was not my idea. I was literally just following orders. I mean, honestly. Seriously. Here she is, just to remember. She was bragging about how well they're taking care of the children back in June of 2018. We now know that in at least, I mean, I don't know how many instances make it appalling. I think one does. But in many instances, the so-called family separation, which, to be clear, is taking children from their parents. This is not, I'm separating two adults who can then pick up a phone and call or leave wherever they are and find each other. They're not separating families. They're taking children from their parents. And here she is bragging 2 years ago to, I guess, some sheriffs. This is the National Sheriff's Association saying, don't believe your, and again, this is before the stories of children dying in their custody, the stories of children being lost, children having no idea what was going on, all the stories of the way the children were reacting under intense stress because they've been kidnapped. Here she is bragging to the National Sheriff's Association that, relatively speaking, the way that we warehouse these children is pretty good.
It is important to note that these minors are very well taken care of. Don't believe the press. They are very well taken care of. You know this, as many of you have detention facilities of your own. We operate according to some of the highest standards in the country.
Pause it. Some of the highest standards in the country? And really, what are the standards that they're competing against? Other facilities that detain children, I guess? For-profit prisons?
Start kicking in.
Right. Go ahead.
We operate according to some of the highest standards in the country. We provide food, medical, education, and all needs that the child requests.
Wow.
This literally does sound like a guy that they just nabbed after like having children tied up in his basement for years and just like, I always fed them. That does not sound like morally different to me at all. You're supposed to feed and give medical care to children you've kidnapped. At the very least.
That's the baseline.
Yeah, what do you want to say? Like other people, like Steve was proposing that we starve them.
You're also supposed to do that for animals in your care, for that matter. Here is Kirsten Nielsen's former press secretary, David Lapin, talking on NPR. I can't imagine there's been much, that he got much pushback to his attempt to sort of, to make it seem like, well, she had no choice. Deep down, she's a good person.
When she defended the policy that was so controversial leading to family separation, I mean, did you think that you were seeing someone who believed in that policy or who was representing her boss?
My view is that she was representing her boss. And in many ways, again, that's the role that the secretary plays. Remember, too, that what really started that policy, or what led to that, was the zero tolerance policy put in place by the Attorney General. So at the time, I thought that it should have been the Attorney General that was there having to defend the policy and not the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Here's why that type of excuse is such BS. Because, A, we know that she could have resigned. Like, if you had any type of moral compass and the Attorney General says, we're going to implement a policy that's going to require your agency to warehouse children in a record manner, and we're going to not only you're going to warehouse these children, they are going to be forcibly removed from their parents. You're then going to label them as unaccompanied minors because you have made them unaccompanied. You're then going to shuttle them to the furthest reaches of this country in the middle of the night at times so that human beings who do have a moral compass can't see what you're doing. That's a very good opportunity to say, you know what? Pass. I think I'll resign. Like, it doesn't matter whether it was her idea or Donald Trump's. If you don't have, I mean, and we have seen this time and time again, right? Like if she's not there, it's going to be someone worse. But apparently it's going to be someone worse anyways. And we've seen it time and time again. All the generals who were saving us from Donald Trump. Well, then why would you ever leave? Then why wouldn't you go public immediately the day after you're out, right? I mean, if you're being held hostage there for the sake of the country, I can't quit, because if I quit, horrible things are going to happen. On day one, we should already be watching the multitude of interviews with Kirsten Nielsen on every network talking about the horrors she saw and her screaming to the heavens like, I'm going to be the first witness at the impeachment trials. But we don't. So it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah. And what's with the quote unquote liberal media letting these ghouls come on to rehabilitate themselves?
The NPR has been the same as it always has been. It is a corporate mouthpiece to power. That's it. They have never been anything different. And that's why they go there. It's because they know they're not going to get challenged. Even less so. Well, if we go to Fox, of course we're not going to get challenged, but nobody's going to take us seriously. And if we go to any other network, frankly, we might get challenged. It's grotesque. She should be shunned in public. It's really disgusting to watch anybody who would in any way help with the reformation of these people.
What sector do you think she's going to lobby for?
My guess is, if I had to guess, she's going to be working for the private prison industry in some fashion or another. Just because she's well versed. And you know why she's going to be doing it? Because she wants to make it better for the children.
If she doesn't lobby for it, think of how bad it's going to be.
I am so proud of the initiative that I started at the private prison industry when we now have organic milk for the kids.
Well,
Juice boxes.
That's a stretch.
We paired.
It's good for the milk people too.
Well, we paired with a major organic producer, and it's just wonderful. The kids you could just see the looks on their eyes.
I know of at least 3 instances when a kid had a fever and we gave them medication for it.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe a diversity program for the prison guards.
We were able to have Coca-Cola sponsor many vending machines in the place. Now, of course, they don't have cash.
Oh, now Matt's all of a sudden like, huh.
Human rights.
Folks, reminder, you want to protect your loved ones with the peace of mind of life insurance. Think you can't afford it? Chances are SelectQuote can help you get it for less than $1 a day. SelectQuote comparison shops up to 10 highly rated companies, including Prudential, Banner Life, Mutual of Omaha, and others, to find you the company with best rates. For example, SelectQuote could find you a 35-year-old man a $500,000 policy for under $19 a month. It's less than $1 a day. A cup of coffee costs more than that. SelectQuote's breakthrough technology allows them to quickly match you with the best insurance company to find your best policy. Plus, quotes are free. I've told you guys many times before, for each of my children that were born, I ended up getting life insurance, but I'm old. I was old when my kids were born, and I'm older now. Get it while you're young. If you're anticipating the birth of a child, or if you have any reason to believe your loved ones might need help if you die, that's what insurance is for. And It is, believe me, it's quite a relief. And to have an easier way of finding the best rates makes a big difference. SelectQuote could save you time and money. You can get your free quote at selectquote.com/majority today. That's selectquote.com/majority for your free quote. Don't put off protecting your family another day. Selectquote.com/majority. Get full details on the example policy at selectquote.com/majority. Your your premium could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states. Check it out, folks. Also, I feel like I don't even have to pitch this to you, but the New Yorker represents the best writing in America today, both online and in print. New Yorker covers a full range of topics, including politics, news, international affairs, climate change, popular culture, the art, fiction, food, humor, cartoons, you name it. I don't know if a week goes by when we're not citing a New Yorker story. Not to mention, New Yorker touches on subjects that many readers may not have previously put much thought into, like the world's diminishing supply of sand or paper jams, stink bugs. I've actually thought quite a bit about stink bugs.
I believe that.
Hunting down heirloom beans. Yeah, that was the bug that was on Hannity. New Yorker's incredible writers include contributors like Ronan Farrow, who's written breaking news on Harvey Weinstein, Les Moonves, some of the biggest stories of the year, and Helen Rosner, a James Beard award-winning food writer who contributes essays and reports on all things gastronomic. Gastronomic? Am I saying that right? There's all sorts of stuff that you can check out in the New Yorker. I have been reading this story about a guy who I didn't really know, but the rise and fall of a New York shock jock. How Trump betrayed the general who defeated ISIS by Robin Wright. These are just some of the stories that's in there. There's 5 scenarios for the Israeli election. William Barr's Choices by Jeffrey Toobin. Joe Biden and the Perils of Good Intentions. We'll see about that. But all of these stories, hugely relevant. And of course, I tend to focus on the political ones. But now our listeners can save 50% and get 12 weeks of the New Yorker for just $6. When you go to newyorker.com/majority, enter majority. You'll also get an exclusive tote, as well as unlimited access to the New Yorker's apps, online archives, crossword puzzle, newyorker.com, with 10 to 15 exclusive site-only stories every day. That's newyorker.com/majority. Enter the word majority. Check it out. It's sort of obscene. 12 weeks for $6, and you get the tote. You give the tote away as a birthday gift to somebody. I think that's what I'm going to do. Meanwhile, this episode of the Majority Report is being supported in part by Simple Habit. Simple Habit is a mobile app that provides a massive and diverse library of 5-minute guided meditations. Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. We've talked about the various reasons why you might want to start meditating. It has over 2,000 guided meditations. They're designed for different parts of your day and just about anything you might be dealing with. So you could use Simple Habit to deal with mindfulness, or meditations for anxiety, or for depression, or when you're having trouble falling asleep. Meditations for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or when you just have something important going on at work. Meditations are designed for parents. They have meditations that are specifically for different times during the day, like when you're waking up or your lunch break or when you've just gotten home from work or when you're going to bed. Different people meditate at different times in the day. And this is the best thing about Simple Habit from my perspective, is that you literally have so many different types of meditations and so many that are tailored for the specific context in which you're dealing with. People try different things with meditation. Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what your goals are, regardless of what kind of past experience you've had with meditation. It's the variety of these meditations that sets Simple Habit apart. They just won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Wellbeing App. It's available on iOS, Android, and web browser. And Majority Report audience can try it for free for an entire week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. If you're watching on YouTube, we've put a link below the video description. If you're listening, we've put a link in our audio podcast description. All that, check it out. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break. When we return, Dahr Jamail. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Dahr Jamail. He is a journalist and author of multiple books. His latest is The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. Dahr, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be with you.
And I before you hopped on, I mentioned to you that I thought, I think probably the last time we talked was when I was doing some iteration of this show on Air America, and you were in Iraq. Maybe you were out of Iraq at that time. I don't recall, but you were one of the few journalists who had not who were covering the Iraq invasion who had not embedded with troops. And I mean, how do you go from that type of coverage to climate, as you call it, climate disruption? We'll get to why you call it that way, but.
Well, before I started working over in Iraq as a journalist, I was living up in Alaska and spending a lot of time in the mountains. And so I moved up there in 1996 and immediately saw really dramatic impacts of runaway climate disruption even then, with dramatically receding glaciers and having it raining in Anchorage during Christmas time and things like this that were just huge anomalies and very much out of the norm. So the seed was planted back then, and then several years later, where I started working as a journalist, but started doing that in Iraq, all the while in the back of my mind was what was happening. And then, of course, by then, more and more studies coming out, more and more alarming observations about what was happening with climate disruption. So the stage was really set. And then at the end of my oil reporting, of course, I was completely burnt out on that and needed a break. And so that's when I decided to make the transition.
So let's go into the places that you visited, because in some respect, I mean, there's a similar dynamic here. I mean, obviously you back up your, I guess, personal assessments with data and with interviews with experts, but you're providing sort of on the ground, as it were, sense of what's happening. Let's start with Alaska then, and you write about Denali. Tell us about your observations there, and what are the implications of those?
Well, I really bookend this book with my time on Denali because that's really where my observations started. And so I made it a point to go back to places like Denali that I had a long-term relationship with. The first time I was on that mountain was in 1997. And in the book I went back, it was 19 years later, it was 2016, I went back up there as a volunteer with a National Park Service team doing rescues. And so what I found was the Kahiltna Glacier, the main glacier that you traverse when you're going up the standard route on the mountain, had really lost a dramatic amount of ice. It over several decades, actually, it's lost at least 30 feet of thickness, enormous volume of ice. The toe was receding dramatically. And then even higher up on Denali, a mountain that's only about 250 miles south of the Arctic Circle, and the summit's just over 20,000 feet. Even that high, there's dramatic loss of ice and changing of glaciers and things like rockfall that you have to worry about high up at 18,000 feet on the mountain, an area that previously we all had just assumed this is a permanently frozen area, and yet there's areas you have to wear a rock climbing helmet to protect yourself in case of rockfall. So really dramatic anecdotal evidence all over the place up there.
The rockfall being, I mean, I think that as the ice begins to melt, rocks get loose. I mean, that's the idea is that was not an issue even a couple of decades ago.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Rocks that had been frozen into glaciers for millennia, or glaciers melting enough that rocks that were on the ground but being held there in place by ice that had existed for thousands of years was now loosening up.
And then talk about the implications of glaciers in this country, in the lower 48, I guess. I hadn't really given much thought to the fact that we have any, and I guess we may not for much longer.
That's right. This is where it gets even more dramatic. So I went out into Glacier National Park with Dr. Dan Faegre. He's a U.S. Geological Survey scientist, and he said that in Glacier National Park, they are, at the current trajectory of melting and temperature increases, they are on track to have no functional glaciers there by 2030. So that's a little bit less than 11 years from now. And then he said something that I had also cited in numerous other studies, peer-reviewed studies, showing that at current trajectories of warming and melting, that we could have no glaciers left anywhere in the contiguous 48 states by 2100. So out here where I live in Washington State, where we have over 100 glaciers in Olympic National Park alone, hundreds of glaciers in the Cascades. These are very, very important for our water sources for drinking and agriculture and the ecological services that they provide to other species. To think about these all being gone in barely 80 years from now is quite shocking.
All right. Well, will you just walk us through that, though? The practical implications, because I don't think that people really spend much time contemplating what function glaciers play and how they play those functions in various parts. Obviously, not just here, but in the Himalayas or wherever. Like, what function glaciers serve, so that we get a sense of how this is going to impact people. Once they're gone.
Right. You mentioned actually a place that I think I could use as the best example to really underscore the point of the dramatic human impact. So the Hindu Kush region of the Himalaya, this is a giant ice field with multiple glaciers, and it's the source of 7 of Asia's major river systems. And that area is on a pace of melting, according to recent studies, that all that ice could be completely gone by 2100. Well, that ice serves those rivers, which serve 1.5 billion people their drinking water and irrigation water. So if all that ice and water go away, where do all those people go? Because you cannot live somewhere where there's no water to drink nor any water for your crops. So that's a stunning thing to think about. So where do those 1.5 billion people go? And then what happens to the places where they go? Is there enough water there? Is there going to be enough food, housing, etc.? So very, very dramatic human impacts. And even out here, we've already seen them when in 2015, the Olympic Mountains nearby where I live had 6% of their normal snowpack. Glaciers are dramatically receding on top of that. So we had a statewide drought declared by May of that year. So we had water rationing in the small town where I live. Farmers on nearby organic farms were really struggling to make it to meet their water needs for their crops, and crops were being lost. So then we have food spikes and things that go along with that. Another dramatic example, just very briefly, I'll point out, is the Arab Spring. Many studies have shown that drought across the Middle East really set the table for these dramatically spiking food prices and the unrest and destabilization politically that it caused in those countries. And many people believe that was the spark that lit the fuse that caused the Arab Spring.
I don't want to get too hung up on the glaciers, but just explain. I just don't think that people are conscious of like how it is that a glacier provides that kind of drinking water. In the case of the Himalayas, it's because the glacier continually is growing and shrinking in its normal state, but right now we just have it just shrinking, in which case this sort of reserve of water is just going to go away.
Exactly. So glaciers are always growing and shrinking. As you said, they're consistently getting fresh snow every year that compacts down and adds mass to the glacier. But at the same time, it moves, and in its lower regions and in its terminus, it does melt out, and then that provides river water and groundwater for everything below it, for growing trees, for animals, and for humans. But when you increase the atmospheric temperatures, there's less snow falls on the glacier, because a lot of the time the winter precipitation comes down as rain instead of snow. So that's a contributing factor to the diminishment of glaciers. And then, of course, as you increase the temperatures, there's going to be more melting. So it starts literally losing mass over time. And this is what I outlined in the book. I went out with a USGS team up on a major glacier up in Alaska that they've been studying for over 50 years and tracking a very, very consistent trajectory of mass loss across that glacier. And in their entire benchmark study program that covers glaciers that are representative in regions where they exist around the entire United States. And so they're all on a downward trajectory, and this is in line with what scientists are seeing globally, that all glaciers around the world are on a downward trajectory, and it's accelerating. And it's very disturbing because they also refer to glaciers as essentially the canary in the coal mine with climate disruption, because they're well along a pace of exhibiting the impacts that we've caused to the planet, and they're sort of an early warning indicator. And because of that, that's why this is so disconcerting.
I mean, in some respects, the that's basically what you did. You visited different canaries, as it were, around the world, it feels like. One of those canaries was in Miami, and you met with, or I guess you went around with one of the city engineers, who was... and also I met with the chief geologist at the University of Miami. Tell us, I think people understand that Miami is built on essentially what is a sponge, and flooding is not sort of an event as much as it is a state of being now, it feels like, with Miami. But tell us what you learned there.
That's right. So I went around in Miami Beach, actually, with the city engineer at the time, Bruce Mallory, and they were actively raising the levels of many of the streets 3 feet to try to buy themselves time to prepare to mitigate for rising seas. And he knew that probably wasn't enough. It was a temporary measure, but it was better than nothing. But it was already causing problems because flooding is a part of daily life there. Every time there's a high tide, and then if you throw in some significant rainfall and even a flooding event, then you're going to have big problems. And that's what they were already seeing in Miami Beach, where they were raising, in one area they'd raise the streets 3 feet, but then of course you can't raise the houses and the buildings nearby. One of these high-rise buildings flooded, and then the building owner was unable to get insurance because the insurance company then said, well, sorry, we don't have to pay you because your ground floor is now a basement. So there's unforeseen consequences like that are already happening. And then over in South Miami, I interviewed Mayor Philip Stoddard, and he talked about how they're already having major problems with, as seas rise, it's coming up underneath the ground in the water table and causing major problems in people's septic systems, where literally every time it floods or there's a king tide, then people are literally having raw sewage coming up into their bathtubs and back up into their toilets. So you can't live in a place where that's happening. So you've got a situation where, as Dr. Harold Wanless, the expert that you mentioned, who I interviewed at University of Miami, Coral Gables, a leading sea level rise expert internationally, and he said, just to cut to the chase, that we are locked in for dramatic sea level rises that most people have no idea are coming. He picked apart reasons why the predictions made by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change are far, far, far too low. And he said, look, last time there was this much CO2 in the atmosphere, seas were tens of meters higher than today. And to be specific, he said, look, last time we came out of a ice age, the atmosphere had 100 parts per million CO2 higher content after that happened. And what corresponded with that was 100 feet of sea level rise. So if we do the math, and I asked him this question, since we've had 130 ppm CO2 to the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution began, I asked him, Dr. Wanless, does that mean then we have 130 feet of sea level rise already baked into the system? And he said yes.
What does that mean? I mean, so people could theoretically right now go and see where they, I imagine there's some site online where they could find out just about how high above sea level they are. And if they're at 110, they should find a little bit of higher ground.
Well, this obviously is going to take time for that much ice to melt. The thing is that you look around, it's in motion. There's no question about it. Dr. Eric Rigno, lead scientist of a major study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, came out just this January, the study that showed that melting across all of the Antarctic has increased sixfold since just the 1970s. He told the New York Times, quote, Antarctica is melting away, end quote. So it's already happening. Obviously, that's going to take a long time, but there are some dramatic accelerations that we're seeing right now. The Thwaites Glacier there is melting away dramatically. The Western Antarctic ice sheet is melting away dramatically, and we're also seeing dramatic acceleration across much of Greenland. So we are seeing this acceleration start. This is over a time scale where maybe we'll see 10 feet by 2100, although Dr. Wanless pointed to another study that said we could theoretically even see 10 feet by just 2050. So we are talking on a geologic time scale. That's a blink of an eye. But long term, what this means is that every major coastal city on the planet is going to be underwater. It's not if, it's when.
Right. We're talking right now for young people, their grandkids. This is going to be their grandkids, maybe their great-grandkids are going to be rebuilt. Well, in some instances, Miami, it feels like, grandkids, right? At the least are going to be rebuilding or just closing down shop there, I guess.
Well, that's right, and that's what Dr. Wanless pointed out also, as did Mayor Stoddard, as did some of the other people in South Florida that I spoke with when I was doing my research, that if we had a government on a state and federal level that was behaving responsibly and really reacting the way that they should, given the crisis that's upon us and what's coming and what's already baked into the system, that they would be orchestrating, funding, and managing an orderly evacuation and relocation of essentially all of South Florida. All those people are going to have to go someplace else. They're going to have to get set up in new homes. All the toxic sites down there have to be remediated. Turkey Point Nuclear Power Plant just south of Miami at 6 feet elevation has to be decommissioned and shut down, and all of that moved to higher ground. So you're talking about relocation of millions of people and all the businesses that are there. And instead, we see this just kicking the can down the road. So many of the politicians not even talking about this, pretending it's not happening, and certainly pretending that humans aren't the cause of it. And he felt so strongly about this that he called that all the politicians that are behaving that way. He said, "Look, this is criminal negligence."
Isn't part of the problem on some level that we have people who are that just the span of time in which this is going to happen, a couple of generations, 3 generations, we don't have people in power who are going to be living that long. I mean, it just feels like it's easy to escape culpability. We're down now to the point where I think politicians feel, and frankly, business leaders feel that they can escape culpability if there's, if we're talking about a timeline of 5 to 10 years, never mind one that is several decades to, a century or so.
That's a good point, and I suppose that's one of the factors that they just think that, this isn't, I'm not going to have to deal with this. But, counter to that is look at what's happening every summer now with these increasing frequency and strength of hurricanes and the flooding that comes along with it. And look at the damages just to the U.S. infrastructure on an annual level are going up just about every year now. And if you look at a long-term trajectory, that's unarguable. The flooding that comes along that, look at the wildfires, especially across the western U.S. and particularly California. Up here, the entire West Coast, the better part of the summer now, we have smoke that we're living in. It's right in our face all the time. And then in the winter, of course, we have these polar vortexes as the Arctic continues to get further destabilized. So these dramatic impacts are right in front of our face already. And it's pretty amazing to me that these politicians are able to stay in and kind of perpetuate this crisis while kicking the can down the road while these impacts are already upon us.
You also traveled to the Great Barrier Reef. What did you find there?
Well, what I found there was extremely heartbreaking. I had been there for the first time back in 1995, if I remember correctly, and I was back there in 2017. The first week of what ended up being a major coral bleaching event. It was the second major event of that kind in as many years. And so coral bleaching is what happens when the water temperatures warm up so much that it's at a temperature that the corals can't survive in. So the beautiful algae on them that gives them their brilliant colors, that's a food source for them. And as the waters warm too much, that becomes toxic. The coral then ejects the algae so as not to die, but then it's starving to death, and it's bleach white, and that's why it's called coral bleaching. And if the waters don't cool back down in time, then the coral will die within 3 to 6 weeks of that happening. And that's what's happening. And so when I was there, the bleaching event was occurring, and huge swaths of the Great Barrier Reef were bleaching out. And between the event that happened in 2016, and then the one in 2017, and then another one happened in 2018, over 50% of the reef that bleached out had died in just those 3 years alone. And then right now we have, record warm temperatures in Australia again. And this is the single largest coral structure on the planet. It's 1,400 miles long. It's a World Heritage Site, and most scientists there and many of the studies say that the Great Barrier Reef is essentially in terminal stage, and it probably will not be around for another 10 years.
Wow. So as you're traveling through let's talk about Stan Rushworth, because at the end of the day, as it were, in many respects, you argue that we're almost there, like that so much of this is already baked into the cake that really we need to figure out a way in which to mitigate this, or are we at now the plan should be how are we going to adapt? At what stage are we in this?
I do believe that's where we are, and working on this book and seeing all this firsthand and doing the research, I was confronted with dealing with my grief around this and all the feelings with that on a regular basis. And so I ended up meeting a Native American elder named Stan Rushworth. He's Cherokee. And we started talking, and he started sharing a lot of stories that helped a whole lot. So one of those is that in Western colonialist mindset, we have rights. What are my rights, right? But in indigenous cultures, they believe we're born onto the planet with two primary obligations. One is to serve and take care of the planet. The second is to serve and take care of future generations. And so no matter how bleak things appear to be, they do appear bleak. Humans could even go extinct. There's been a lot of writing about this. We are in the sixth mass extinction. But we don't know for sure that that's going to happen. We do know that tremendous change is baked into the system, and there's going to be a lot of suffering that comes along with that. But no matter how bleak things appear, if I get up each day and I'm thinking about, okay, how can I fulfill those two obligations to the best of my ability to the planet and to future generations, then I've got my work cut out for me, and I've got no shortage of work to do. And I feel very, very strongly about doing that, especially when you look out and you see these student marches, you see these kids walking out of class. They get it. And so am I not going to live my life to serve those kids and be in the deepest solidarity with them as possible, and still do everything I can to try to take care of the parts of this planet that are still intact, and these young kids that, they're born into a world that they didn't create. They're going to have to live in it. So what can we do to help them?
As you look at this stuff, do you think that was there a period of time where we could have made, obviously, on some level, I wonder if human limitations, just from, the inability to see that far into the future and understand our actions today implicate the future, made it ever possible for us to do what needed to be done?
Well, it was back in the 80s when NASA scientist James Hansen went before Congress and sounded the alarm bell. He really, at that point, blew the whistle and said, look, we are changing the climate of the planet. If we don't make some dramatic shifts right now in how we are living, and certainly the economy, we are setting ourselves up for some big trouble in the not so distant future. And if we had listened to him then, and if the U.S. had taken the lead as a leading economic country and said, look, we have to change this entire paradigm. Globalized capitalism is literally killing the planet. And if we started making the dramatic changes back then, we possibly could have averted this. But instead, since then, everything has only accelerated at warp speed. Capitalism has become fully globalized and continues to be so. And, you know, if we're going to talk seriously about mitigation, the first thing we have to talk about is an entirely new economic paradigm, i.e. not capitalism, because this rampant industrial scale production of goods and consumerism, that is precisely what's killing the planet.
And we should also say that the structure of capitalism also created a lot of people who were doing their best to make sure that we didn't listen to people like James Hansen, right? I mean,
that's right.
I mean,
right? Yeah, the system is set up to perpetuate itself, and we have this fossil fuel funded denialist meme in the country, and that's exactly born of the system. I mean, there's over a 97% consensus about human-caused climate disruption, and the less it's 2.9% that either are doubtful about it or disbelieve it. It's you know, there's been some excellent journalism out, very, very easy to find for a long time, that shows that the vast majority of those doubters or deniers are fossil fuel funded.
Right. And so are you in any way heartened by something like the Green New Deal? I mean, it's still just a proposal and is, you know, obviously getting a huge amount of pushback, and it's almost absurd that it's taken this long for just that idea to exist in some, or at least in this more sort of tangible form as something that ultimately could be, you know, a piece of legislation. But does that give you any encouragement?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's you know, anything is better than nothing at this point, and anything that could potentially mitigate this even a little bit is a worthy action. But my critique of it is it doesn't go nearly far enough, and it still doesn't call for a complete shift of the entire economic paradigm, because it's still essentially promoting economic growth and jobs, et cetera, when in reality I think we need to be looking squarely at the fact that the time for degrowth is upon us, and we can either start doing it willingly or it's going to be forced upon us. And I think that's really one of my major critiques of the Green Deal. But I don't want to be too disparaging, because that and other things, you know, anything moving in a better direction than where we're going now is important to do, no matter how fallible it is.
I think that's a good place of anywhere. Dahr Jamail, The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks.
Who boy?
Hard to have any kind of discussion about climate change and not have it be anything other than somewhat depressing. But
really, I feel great right now.
Yeah, I like the opportunity to live in a real life sci-fi hellscape.
The argument that Jamail makes in the book is that they're just simply a moral imperative. So there is impetus to work towards attempting to mitigate the implications of climate change, regardless of whether it appears or to be having results or appears that it might have results.
There's a big thing missing from that interview, though.
Oh man,
pretty big dismissal of ideas.
Well,
so I just got to believe that if we have ideas, then we can innovate together. And then the innovation
competition would start kicking in.
That's why left-wing people hate ideas so much, because you're defeatists.
There's an article in Commune magazine that I would recommend, actually, called "The Uses of Disaster," and it kind of goes with the premise that like we're probably not going to solve this problem before capitalist society begins to crumble. But maybe at least when that happens, it will create an opening to solve it then and also democratize the economy in the way that we need to do.
The point being, when there's 80% less people on the planet, and I'm not being facetious here, when there's 80% less people on the planet, how are we going to live at that point? I mean, obviously we won't be here, but
it's probably going to suck.
Yeah, it's probably going to suck. But the point being that, it's going to be interesting to see how it's structured after the fall.
Certainly. And that's why I'm so interested in Posadism.
Name a single government.
There's going to be a lot of water.
It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom.
Like, people want to make fun of it and say that it's crazy.
I think that drop works, Matt.
Never have I felt like I want to do more primary election coverage than right now.
Hey, and maybe we need a solution to it that risks the imagination of a new kind of possibility.
We definitely
that was
need
what was missing from that.
Have the climate scientists thought about that? Yeah.
That was what was
Can we get that to
missing.
CERN or whoever, the IPCC? They should talk to...
Yeah, well, the IPCC is filled with a lot of negative thinkers.
My God.
A lot of people who don't have a sense of possibility.
Well, folks, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half, which I say with more conviction than I've ever said before, will definitively be more fun than this half.
Run
today.
to your fun space.
You can support this show by going to jointhemajority.report.com, wherein you will support interviews like the one we just had. Jointhemajority.report.com, and then we let you have access to the fun half so that we can at least go back to distracting you and making you feel better about things.
I don't know a lot better, but certainly distracting.
Yes. Slightly better about things as you go along your way and attempt hopefully to do your part and to mitigate this sort of freight train that is coming barreling down the tracks and heading
you
towards
get back to petty media conflicts.
Exactly.
Other sorts of fun
Exactly.
things on the fun half.
It can't be all just the moral obligation to save
How will Michael Tracy
the
not
species.
shave his chin during the climate crisis?
Also, don't forget,
I'm sorry.
JustCoffee.coop featuring 30% off this month. You don't even need to use the coupon code majority. You can if you want, but it won't work, but that's fine. 30% off. Try the different types of Just Coffee. Never had the MR blend? Try it. Never had the WTF blend? Skip it. Go check out. There's so many other blends of coffee.
petty.
You might as well.
So goddamn petty.
Even in the
sometimes
face of
people take
the dude's going to be in the next Batman movie. He doesn't need
Well,
that
it's the
coffee
Joker
stuff.
movie, but fair enough. Some people take in information like we just took in and expands their range of like empathy and input. You're just sort of like,
For everybody,
you know what?
for everybody except for Marin.
Don't buy
for everybody
Marin's
except for Marin.
coffee.
Found out. I know who wrote that movie. That dude's from Worcester. Guy who wrote the movie.
The Joker movie?
Yeah.
Good for him.
Anyways,
Worcester's really spreading its tentacles.
oh my God, Paw sucks.
Yeah, 2018 was the year of the Bronx, and 2019 is the year of Worcester.
Michael, today is Monday.
Yes,
you're gonna have a busy day tomorrow.
Very busy day tomorrow. And I should also say that because next week we're doing a Sunday show on the 14th with Adoma Kechiachu. But tomorrow on Tuesday, Soumya Shankar is going to join us. She's an Indian journalist, and we're talking about India's elections. Will Prime Minister Modi get another term and basically sort of end or cancel the Indian constitution? Or will the Congress Party retake power? We're going to get to that. And then Felix Biederman returns. He's in studio. We're talking about the QAnon hit on the head of the Gambino family, Benjamin Netanyahu's fail son, and various other things that will be amusing. Patreon.com/TMBS, Patreon.com/TMBS, and Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Well over our first 38,000 subscribers. Thanks.
Jamie?
This week on the Antifada, I'm so excited. We had on Brett and Brian from Street Fight Radio.
Nice.
It's been a long time coming. Those guys are awesome. And it's available now, early, 2 days early for our patrons and free for everyone on Wednesday. So if you've been waiting to sign up, now would probably be a good time. We also recorded a bonus with Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session about the movie Us. So that's pretty cool too. Sean's here. You want to say anything, babe? No? Okay. You think I did a good job? Thank you. Yeah, so check it out, folks. It's a really exciting week.
Matt? Congress, but you've heard it before. Records all over the place, and that will continue.
The new Literary Hangover episode has broken weekend download records. We've crossed 2,000 listens for the Oscar Wilde, The Soul of Man Under Socialism. So breaking records all over the place, and so check that out. It's on.
Mom! I couldn't find my wow, so I just decided to go with that.
Interesting one.
Do that to me!
Wow, how did you and David get to that place in the discussion?
Well, actually, we talk about Oscar Wilde's mom, who during the Great Irish Famine was a fairly revolutionary poet with some pretty. Yeah,
that's awesome. And Oscar Wilde was great.
Oscar Wilde
wasn't just he was a great wit, but also had legit
another fun
politics.
thing. Oscar Wilde's full name is Oscar Fingles O'Flaherty Wilde, and because he was Irish.
Oh, I didn't
so
know that.
Some Brits, some of the hoity-toity Brits would say his full name in the same style as sort of Barack Hussein Obama.
Interesting.
Like, he's an Irishman. Yeah.
That's
the funny thing is that today you'd want to include that.
Oh yeah, and he did include it. Like he gave an impromptu speech in St. Paul, Minnesota on St. Patrick's Day, and it was very Irish nationalistic.
It just sounds like frankly a better name
than Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break, head into the fun half, 646-257-3920. We're back. It is the fun half of the program. And as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we Jews have what is known as dual loyalty as we live in America. So we carry around a U.S. passport just because we want to present as being American. But, of course, you all know that we as Jews in America, even though we're American citizens, get to vote in the Israeli elections and really perceive our leadership to... we think it's funny that there's U.S. politicians, but when it comes to our prime minister or president, well, Donald Trump knows who it is.
Good people. But I stood with your prime minister at the White House to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
Posit, I should tell you, he is speaking to the Republican Jewish Coalition. I don't know, Republican, is that a party in Israel? The Republican Party? He also can't say Netanyahu. No, it's very strange. He's going through the same thing. He has trouble with that as well. But there it is, folks. Just in case you were wondering, Donald Trump accuses all of us American Jews of dual loyalty. In fact, that we have a prime minister. He's done this before. I'm quite convinced that he did this before one time.
He's the chief moneylender. No one lends more money than that guy. They all look at him every time they're going.
Netanyahu.
All the Shylocks, they meet together. They say, that guy lends the best money.
Don't look at me. I voted for Israeli Jill Stein.
The best money.
What is this? What the Republican Jewish
Israeli
Coalition
Jill Stein
logo?
is like, we should give them some solar panels and not let them drive.
It doesn't look like they spent a lot on the graphic design budget.
No,
they had
I
like
don't
a
think
generic
so.
eagle and then just took a Star of David out of it.
It is going to be fun to see how much anti-Semitic bullshit garbage they're going to be willing to eat in the name of Israel.
Yeah.
Have fun,
my
guys.
guess is going to be plenty. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 701 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Evie from Fargo.
Evie from Fargo. What's on your mind?
I was just reading like this article. I don't know if it was in Vice or what, but it was about kind of alt-right people on 4chan talking about appealing to normies. And I think with like the people that were the guy that was calling in about Jamie being a communist and that scaring him and whatnot, like I think people on the left need to take that strategy into mind, that we need to kind of like appeal to normies. And so like I guess just like for Jamie, like on that side, the stuff that she says a lot is kind of not appealing to normies, you know.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anyone who is more appealing to normies than me. I mean, is there a more normie person than me?
Yeah,
Maybe
no.
Jewish
This
normies.
is why I like the Majority Report, because it does, I guess, appeal more to that. Because I'm
You have
like an
any
artist.
Can you
idea
give us a
of-
descending
you have
order
any-
ranking of normie appeal, sir?
Any idea?
I'd like this. Will you? All right.
My,
all right. So
Q
Matt
rating
should be one.
I will
right?
tell you right now. My Q rating
Bryce, we
with
don't want to hear about the Q
women.
rating. I want the
no,
vote.
you don't want to hear about the Q rating.
I
My
want to
Q-
repeat the Q rating
But
again.
my Q rating with normies is through the roof. There's nobody who has more of a Q rating with normies than I
But
do.
sir, pretend you're in a focus group, in descending order from most normie to least normie. Rank us.
Well, I just think like, you know, I'm like a communist and whatever. So like, I want to convince people to
You don't
be
sound very
more
normal,
radically
sir.
left. And just like reading that article about how people on the right use these kind of innocuous little points about, you know, whites and men are being attacked. You know, just these little talking points that can kind of shift people further left, I guess. I try to do that more often.
Yeah, I just don't. I think my point is that I think we present pretty normy. I mean, if I can tell you this, that to the extent that we don't have the audience, let's say, of a Pod Save America, that's more of a function of that's less of a function of their politics and more of a function of just their sort of the pedigree.
Oh, right. I don't mean specifically about the Majority Report, but I just mean a lot of people on the left, like in like music and art circles, that like kind of just take it as an aesthetic, and like that they're leftist and don't really try to like reach out to a wider audience and talk to people in their community.
Totally. I agree.
I think that's a good point.
As someone who just got called out by name, I will say that it's never a good thing when the left is a subculture. Unfortunately, that is the way it is in some parts, in some places, in some parts of the country right now, and it's a problem. And I'm always trying to think about ways to fix it. But I think if you want to talk about communist ideas, I think you underestimate their appeal to normies. Like, we just talked to...
I've had...
Like, how many
really
people
great
hate
luck,
their jobs?
Like, talking to coworkers and stuff about it, and they're usually, like, really responsive to it. So it's just a matter of, like, getting those points to people who normally don't hear them, I feel like.
I think,
totally.
I don't know. We got a bunch. I appreciate the phone call. We got a bunch of emails, and I'm not sure exactly what day it was, but where people were talking about while the mofos and the use of mofo, and I'm shortening it. And I think that stuff does. I think that stuff does like scare some people away. It's silly. It shouldn't, but it does. And it is largely performative.
Mofos scares people away?
Just that kind of language.
Just the language. Okay.
Mofo is a euphemism for yes.
I get it.
Well, you need to strike a balance, right? Because you don't want to condescend to normal working class people who aren't already on the left. You don't want to condescend to a version of them that you have in your head that, say, is not accommodating to like trans rights or LGBT rights or whatever, because, you know, the working class isn't just white straight men, and, you know, white straight men do have the capacity to support trans rights. So you don't want to condescend to them. But you also don't want to like push ideas that are, you know, maybe several steps ahead in the chain. You can't skip steps, if that makes sense to you. But I really like the way the guys at Street Fight do it, actually. Like, they have people, they have one day a week, it's just a call-in show. And people call in and they complain about their jobs. They talk about their jobs. They talk about what sucks about work. And that's a real way to build class consciousness without getting into, like, any of the theory mumbo-jumbo.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily... I guess the theory is part of it, but it sounds to me like what the caller's talking about is that there is some desire to sort of to have leftism be an identity, and so there are cultural accoutrements that people use as a way of distinguishing themselves as not being normie, whereas from a political project perspective, presenting as normie as possible is probably the healthiest way or the most effective way to spread these ideas.
Oh, yeah.
So that it's not necessarily that there are people... Michael is snapping his fingers.
Because I agree with you. And I'm also showing how annoying lefties can be.
I only respond to the tinkles. I only respond to the...
Let's stop doing this.
I only respond to the tinkles. Because that's loud. And
we just had an annoying left-wing conversation.
But... you know, it's a sort
sorry, visitor.
There's a little bit of...
My bad.
There's a little bit of I mean, it's also... the easy way to explain that is just clean for Gene, right? I mean, on some level, right? That's the...
Like how people...
You don't know what I'm talking about? Oh, Jesus.
Like how people said that the Occupy Wall Street protesters should be, like, wearing suits and stuff.
Yeah, Eugene McCarthy... the whole idea was get clean for Gene. It was trying to get like the hippies who were supporting McCarthy.
I was thinking like Billie Jean King or something.
Yeah, but like
Jesus.
that also, it's kind of it's kind of respectability politics when you do it that way.
No, see that
like the hippies.
That's
were,
exactly
like the workers in the factories were growing their hair out while leftists were trying to get clean for Gene.
Okay, well, that may be the case, but I'm just the dynamic is present to society to increase the sort of trust from normies as a way of spreading this ideology. That's
it's like
idea.
the girl in Ferguson in her prom dress getting led away by the cops, for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
also
I think
just the language, focus on broad-based things that are relevant to people and stop trying to suck them into subcultures.
Yeah, here's the other
to their real, actual lived interests, and that is across the board. I mean, including areas where we need to actually fight. Like unhealthy societal consensus on, but don't turn it into a subculture.
Like,
I think we're all on the same page.
I don't think we should go out of our way to make the left a subculture ever, but I also don't think we should be overly focused on like how we look and present rather than the kind of politics that we're pushing. Because I would push back against the idea that there's even like a normal person. Like, what does that even mean? It means different things to different people. Like, am I a normal person?
Hell no.
I have I've got cat children. I've got feelings.
But when
like
you
anybody
say,
else.
well, when you say normie, what do you mean?
Well, it means different things in different contexts, and I try not to use it too much because it's really kind of vague unless I define it. But in this context, the way I would generally use it is like someone who's not already an engaged part of the left.
So anybody who's not a leftist is a normie.
In this context, sure.
Okay.
Like when you're talking about appealing to normal people, why do you need to appeal to them? Because they're not already part of the left.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think they're, to me, it's just sort of people who are mainstream, don't spend a lot of time necessarily thinking about these things, aren't necessarily wanting to engage, because you could have non-leftists who are highly engaged in politics. Like, I wouldn't call somebody who was like deeply steeped in libertarianism to be a normie, right? I mean,
normal people who don't spend their days and nights thinking about politics.
Well, ideology probably has something to do with it too.
Are engaged with other pursuits in life and don't necessarily politicize everything.
Right.
Yeah, and that's different from subcultures, I think. Because there can be like punk rockers who also don't care about politics,
Right, but I think that if you're punk rock, then I think you're open to sort of at least alternative perspectives on. You don't think so?
Oh God, I mean, how many of the Proud Boys are hipsters who live in Bushwick? Surprisingly, a lot of them.
How many?
But that's
the Proud
Boys is a subculture.
Would you say that? But you didn't listen to what I said.
All right, fair enough.
Alternative perspective on things. That is. You can be a white supremacist, and that is a fairly alternative, lifestyle choice. To be going out and hanging out with roving gangs of white ethno-nationalists, I would say is alternative. It's not necessarily, my alternative, but it is alternative, as opposed to like, I'm just hanging out and, maybe we'll go get sushi Friday night or, talk about the movie that's getting all the box office acclaim.
Minions.
And so, that's why I think like normie is not, it's the idea that it's specifically everybody who's not on the left doesn't make any sense. Because I have a feeling that those Proud Boys probably also talk about normies.
Definitely.
And they do it in exclusion of themselves. And so the idea is that it inherently has to do with people who just more or less, and I'm not saying this in a denigrating way, but just go with the flow, follow the herd, don't contemplate alternative ideas. And there are signifiers for those people that make them a little nervous about things when they don't see it. Maybe it's clothing, maybe it's haircuts, maybe it's, the number of piercings or tattoos or less. I mean, I think,
it's just even just like
tattoos are getting much more...
or feeling like they're getting
30 years ago
sucked into some weird side conversation that has nothing to do with their lives.
And these subcultures have become so mainstream that they're almost meaningless at this point. I mean, people used to say hipsters and now they just say millennials because hipster became so broad as to mean like any young person.
I just think that I think that your perspective on it is a little bit narrow. I just think that like I don't think that people even use. I mean, maybe millennials, but hipsters, like for the broad population, a lot of they just don't. There's just not this savvy about these things, and because they don't care. And so the idea is like, how can you go into your fairly generic workplace with your workers and present a corrective in the context of all the signifiers that seem like a normie.
Well, I will say that certain people in anarchist circles have been talking lately about how they need to stop doing the black bloc and maybe do the gray bloc, where they just like look like everybody else. So that might be one tactic.
I mean, two other examples are like you look at the way Anand Giridharadas and Rutger Bregman, for instance, are able to get into certain places and like just detonate like truth bombs to a certain extent in like Davos, for instance. Like it's because they present a certain way that they're in that position in the first place.
Right. Going to the phones, calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
This is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. What a normie.
Yeah, well, totally. I wanted to weigh in on normie, which is maybe the new cuck. I don't know. So I've talked before about how I come from a religious background, and there is some value in having, clips of your show or whatever that aren't littered in F-bombs and things like that, because it makes people like me more comfortable, or allows us to share things with people who, they're not solidly left or right. They're mostly just apolitical.
Right. Normies.
But who are sensitive. Normie, yeah. So, like my sister, she hates Trump because he's gross and everyone knows that. But she voted for Mitt Romney for Senate in Utah. And I was like, what the hell? And she had no idea that, she doesn't know. She's not really paying attention. And it's hard when you are really involved in politics or you're interested in it to remember that, that's most people.
Right.
And so there's value in, if you do a really good interview on, whatever, and it's presented in a way that's normie friendly, I could share it with somebody like that who is suddenly thinking, literally for the first time in her life about something like universal basic income or whatever. So I think there's value in that. But I wanted to say real quick, so you've put a lot of thought into your set, but I'm moving on from the other thing. But when you get this reverse camera of the rest of whatever's going on there, it's a total disaster.
Yeah, I've been told that, actually. I have been told that, and got to contemplate.
Is this like a symbolic of the general wage boss slave labor type relationship, whatever thing is going on in the studio? Is this a deeper metaphor for what's happening? That Sam is up front. He gets the lights and the panels and
it's like
the
Snowpiercer
thing, and then everyone else is in a closet. It looks like.
Well, the irony is that we're actually in
a
a smaller area. But yes, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think this has been something that has been brought to my attention, and I've been trying to contemplate how to make it better, and then I stop contemplating for extended periods of time, and then somebody reminds me again, and then I contemplate about it for a while, and then I forget to continue to contemplate. So yes, but that might be the next
classic boss move.
Yeah, that might be the next big project. Each year I end up doing one big sort of project, because the grind of the Daily Show is always sort of difficult. But maybe we need to sort of make the other half of the set, the lesser half of the set, as you might imagine, we call it around here, more presentable.
Get a ring light.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's fair to call it a set. It's just whatever is happening back there.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
Yep. Right.
Yep.
Is
that it?
I was going to say real quick, I got one more thing. So, you've been talking about how people like their employer-provided insurance. But every year I have to pick a plan for my office.
Wait, I've been talking about that?
Every day.
I've been pushing it.
Sounds
Okay.
like people love people with their beloved private insurance that they love, and that's the problem with Bernie's plan.
Not you, but this is like the retort to Medicare for All. Well, people actually love their employer-based insurance. Right. But this is like my least favorite thing to do every year as an employer, to go through these plans, because they're all terrible and they're all really expensive. And this year I was thinking about downgrading, because I'm a boss like you. Like, I don't care what the second half of my studio looks like, right?
Of course.
To a bronze plan. And it was going to save me like thousands of dollars. So I'm like spending this money in my head as the boss. Like, I'm going to do this or pay off my student loans or whatever. And then I felt guilty about it. But the bottom line is, like, even for the employer, it's a weird system that we have. Like, somebody on Twitter said that employers like to provide insurance because then we have greater control over our employees. Like, they depend on the job more. But I think that's bullshit. Like, most employers don't like providing insurance because it's so expensive.
I think bigger employers, it may be different with a bigger employer.
Well, I don't know. But the bottom line is, like, all of these plans are terrible.
The only argument I think that people would have in terms of like why people like employer-based insurance is simply that first of all, we have been socialized to have such low expectations for what constitutes health insurance that I think people are just like, I have it. I just don't want it to get messed with. And all they got to do, if you work for a big company, is just make your election at the beginning of the year or whenever the open enrollment is. And I just got to sign off it. And then you don't really think about it. Okay, I got to do these co-pays, or I'm stuck in this network, or I can go out and I can pay, out of network, and I got to pay a bigger co-pay. But the number of people who actually need it to keep them out of bankruptcy is small enough that it's hard for them to represent a political constituency when they find out that, like, oh, this is not preventing me from going into bankruptcy. And that's the problem. Right. I mean, that's the problem. It's like, if fire insurance, it would be a little bit more dramatic if fire insurance didn't work. Let's say, like, that 90% of fire, or some ungodly percentage of fire insurance claims actually were not paid off. That would be a little bit bigger because the whole community sees, like, oh, that building caught on fire. And if people are, their house caught on fire, they're not they're not embarrassed by it. But it's just not the same with medical insurance. And to the extent that we hear these stories, they seem far and few between. But, you know this. Prior to the ACA, over 50% of bankruptcies were a function of medical costs, personal bankruptcies. And I think the numbers, are lowered, but not significantly lowered.
Right.
Appreciate the call, Ron Reagan.
Hey, I do have one quick question. One quick question, and then I'll let you go. A few weeks ago, I literally just saw this note scribbled on my desk. A few weeks ago, you said that something like 60% of people who drown die from embarrassment because they're embarrassed to call for help. I'm just curious how you could possibly know that.
I did not give a statistic, but my understanding from the experts are that people, when they're drowning, do not call for help until it's too late. I don't know. They've done studies.
But, I mean,
Google it. I don't know.
Doesn't make sense.
We mean it doesn't make
How
sense.
are they reporting that? If they're dead, they can't tell you that they were too embarrassed to call for help.
I didn't say drowned to death.
Ouija boards.
Maybe people who just drown and then
that
are
makes
saved.
sense.
All right. Bye, Ronald Reagan.
Well, be a little bit more clear.
Maybe you should take notes about your clients instead of like looking on your desk. Like, I mean, what kind of desk situation you got there? I took this weeks ago and I found it. You engraving it into your desk?
It's a master litigator at work.
Speaking of immigration attorneys, Donald Trump had this to say about people who are, and there's a story in the Times today, I think it was, about, maybe it was over the weekend, about women in Honduras who are subject to enormous amount of violence and are trying to get out of the country. I have the piece right in front of me. But on a daily basis, we're starting to see these pieces. And particularly in the context of cutting aid to these multiple Mexico countries as we have down there, according to Fox News. The idea, like this is that Black Mirror show, right? I remember that one, essentially the ICE people of that show were given some type of either drug or something to actually see immigrants as literally alien beings that they could then shoot. And that's, of course, a metaphor. But those type of tactics are being employed right now by the President of the United States. I don't know if he's conscious of what he's doing or not. He's just, he may not be, but that's the de facto impact of talking about people who have run from their countries because they are fearing for their lives or their safety or the lives of their children, coming to this country to seek asylum, knowing that their chances of getting it are slim, but if they can get asylum here, it is worth it because of what they're running from. Here's Donald Trump commenting on these people.
People coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before. And because of the weak laws, they come in fast. We get them, we release them, we get them again, we bring them out. It's crazy. The dumbest laws, as I said before, the dumbest laws on immigration in the world. So we're going to take care of it, Margaret. We'll get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. What he's talking about is our asylum process. That's what he's talking about.
That's fascism. I just think we could just underline, like, you know, the
extermination
pedantry about that. That's what it is. I mean, that you could stack up against any of the highest dehumanization rhetoric of Germany, Serbia, Rwanda. That's it.
Here is more on that from Donald Trump in front of and this is really reprehensible on some level, even more so because of the audience, frankly. He's in front of the Republican Jewish Coalition leadership meeting. I'm not one of those people who believes that because it says in the Bible you should take in immigrants. But if there is a constituency in the past 100 years that might be sensitive to the idea of refugees, of running from a situation that creates great peril and harm and danger to your families, you would expect a Jewish coalition of any political stripe to have that level of sensitivity. Apparently not when it comes to the Republican Jewish coalition, and obviously not Donald Trump.
And the asylum program is a scam. Some of the roughest people you've ever seen. People that look like they should be fighting for the UFC. They read a little page given by lawyers that are all over the place. You know, lawyers. They tell them what to say. You look at this guy, you say, wow, that's a tough cookie. I am very fearful for my life. I am very worried that I will be accosted. If I am sent back home, no, he'll do the accosting. Asylum, oh, give him asylum, he's afraid. He's afraid. We don't love the fact that he's got tattoos on his face. That's not a good sign. We don't love the fact that he's carrying the flag of Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, only to say he's petrified to be in his country. To confront this border crisis, I declared a national emergency.
I mean, like literally,
the Republican Jewish coalition.
Yeah,
hilarious.
This is so like. It really does. Like, you can imagine this type of thing, and I could see like making a movie, like a dark satire where you would put in that laugh track during those things as he's mocking people who are seeking asylum, and the idea, frankly, that he's doing this to a room full of Jews, and they are laughing, is so horrific. So horrific. I mean, I don't know like what age these Jews are, but I know that Jews in my generation, many of our Hebrew school teachers were survivors of the Holocaust who would talk about how Jewish refugees were turned away.
Yeah, well, Jews are
from
people.
Country after country. And the idea that he could use this language about refugees is just un-effing believable. It's stunning. And the idea that there aren't, like, frankly, teams of rabbis or Jewish leaders who are not speaking out now is a horror.
I'm not.
It's really a horror. I mean, to you know, how many times has it been pounded in like never forget, never forget, never forget, never forget? Guess what? They forgot. That is the very definition of forgetting. There was nobody who came up with that slogan who thought this only applies to Jews. Unbelievable. I mean, really, it's shocking.
It is sick. It is disgusting. And there have been, groups like Jewish Voices for Peace are very good on this and very prominent on this. But I think that this is also, this is the politics of modern Israel migrating home, right? And that kind of fundamental shift in perspective when never again shifts from a global commitment to protecting all categories of people to never again means we're going to annex the West Bank and pound Gaza.
Yeah,
and obviously the Republican Jewish Coalition is the essence of that position, and it's just pure ethno-nationalism. There's no values you're talking about.
Yeah,
None.
And they convert the tragedy of the Holocaust from a never again for anybody into a cudgel to beat people with who don't support the actions of the Israeli government. It's insane.
I mean, I don't want to make this about Israel here because I want to keep it limited to the fact that he's up there mocking refugees to a group of Jews whose relatives could have easily, and maybe in some cases were, not allowed to come into this country. Oh, they're afraid. They're coming from Germany. They're afraid. Look at them. Look at them. They're afraid. They're very wealthy. They're a lawyer. They're a doctor, but they're afraid of their country. I mean, Jesus. The idea that half that room didn't walk out going like that was really offensive.
Well, that is the natural outcome of that kind of thinking.
They're Republicans. If you want to just keep it domestic, they're Republicans.
That's just unbelievable. I mean, it really is unbelievable that they're just laughing and rolling on the floor in that room.
Yeah, he was killing it.
God.
I also just even want to take a very tangential point here too, and also say that people might be fleeing countries for their lives, and they could be a man who is 6'3" and ripped, this bizarre. I understand
catch bullets.
I mean, it's this bizarre physicalization of obviously, if you're a dude who's trim, of course your life isn't in danger.
This is Willie
This
Horton.
is so demented.
Yeah, you can fight a death squad all by yourself.
This is Willie
Explain
Horton.
Horton to people.
Well, Willie Horton.
That's important.
Everybody. I mean, I don't know. Everybody knows.
No,
Willie
I don't think
Horton.
everybody does. It's important.
George Herbert Walker Bush, Roger Ailes, and Lee Atwater. When they went after Michael Dukakis, they put up pictures of Willie Horton, who was a parolee, I think, in Massachusetts, and ended up killing someone, a black man. But this is, I mean, the idea of the dangerous, black man is coming to get your family, fairly well established and old in this country, used by Republicans. I'm not Republicans, by racist demagogues, probably at one time, back in the day, the Democrats.
Also where the word cuck comes from
Yes,
more recently.
Exactly. I mean, this is as old as American politics. So this imagery is a big part of it. It is the whole idea of these guys, these aren't humans. They're people of color who look like they're tough and mean. Like you're watching some 70s version of your standardized criminal element. That Donald Trump probably grew up on. I mean, it's the same thing as he did with
the Central
Park Five. I mean, so it's all part of that same.
Monstrous other.
Yeah. Meanwhile, all right, well, let's go to the phones here. Calling from a 925 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Daniel from Concord, California.
Daniel from Concord, California. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm just a moderator from Bernie Sanders' Dank Meme Stash on Facebook, and I'm just responding to your guest, Stephanie Mercener. I might be messing up her name a little bit, but we have over 400,000 members. I'd like to talk about memes.
Oh, sure. All right. So I should just tell people, because I didn't interview Stephanie Mercener on this show. I did on Ring of Fire, and she was writing about how there is literally an infrastructure in which to teach people on the right, a lot of it coming out of Turning Points USA, to create memes. In part, I think, to meet, a certain subset of people where they are within social media as a way of inculcating them into, right-wing worldviews. But, okay, so you're a rep from Dank Memes. What's up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could respond to a lot of points that she's made, for example, that a lot of memers are just in basements somewhere, making these memes. That might be true for the right, but in the left, personally, I'm studying to be a software engineer. The admin of our meme stash is studying to be a lawyer. So we're some pretty educated people. And so, I mean, we're just trying to make memes, trying to get some normies to adopt a few of Bernie's positions as well. We're just trying to be appealing.
All right, well, let me ask you this. I think the point of her piece, though, was that there's an actual genuine infrastructure on the right that is funded.
Okay.
That is funded to create these. Literally, you have an organization where there is a guy who is sent around to train people on making memes, and it's paid for. Now, I have no doubt that on some level, you've created at least some enterprise to do so. But, my other presumption is that you're not getting funded by any big left-wing funders.
Yes, we are not, and that's why I would love to extend an offer to your listeners that if they want to become a moderator and help make these memes, they're free to contact our admin, and and get enlisted in the meme force.
Yeah, and I think and so wait, so give the address. What's the website where are you? Where would people do that?
You just go on Facebook, Google Bernie Sanders Dank Meme Stash, and we have over 400,000 members, so we're probably going to be the first link that pops up. And so just message the admin if you're a really good, because I know lots of people who watch your show make memes about the show, like videos and stuff like that, and they're pretty hilarious. So I mean, we'll just offer a supportive group to like help this creation of memes, and it's all volunteer.
Yeah, and I think that's the point that she's making. Like the right has already institutionalized this, and they are providing literally institutional support for this generation of stuff. I mean, it's not a terribly dissimilar story than most things. They do the same on the right in terms of like YouTube shows and podcasts. So, but all right, I appreciate the phone call. We'll put the link, or we'll write it up in our.
When did you move out of your mom's basement, sir?
A few years ago.
All right, let's get the chronology going.
We were a superpower. Yeah,
well done.
We are now a hyperpower.
Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. Long time no talk to.
I'm
Josh.
calling from Chicago, by the way.
Whoa.
I just wanted to. Yeah.
Trace the call.
Oh yeah, no problem. Actually wanted to call and talk about something I've noticed about Bernie's campaign so far.
Okay.
And difference between him in 2016 and him in now. One of the things I've noticed, and I don't know if this is like a Warren thing, or something that Warren is maybe influencing him on, is he's much more specific on his policies this time around than he was in 2016. I think he was speaking more about resolutions in 2016, Medicare for all, and other things. And I think now we've seen a very specificity in his policies that is very different than it was back in 2016. Just he's talked about different policies introduced, like the one where it will basically overturn right to work in different states in America, like nationwide. And I guess, do you think this is Warren pushing him and making him a better candidate, or am I the only one? Am I crazy? Am I the only one who's noticed this?
You're not crazy. And I think I think Warren is definitely upping the.
So you didn't have to be in 2016.
Well,
you didn't have to be.
But it's not just that, Josh. It really, honestly, it goes back. I mean, I think Warren has had a very positive influence on all the candidates, and I'm sure that it ups the stakes for Bernie in that respect. But it goes back to what I've said a million times. In 2016, Bernie Sanders was not running to win. He was running to push a specific message, and it just simply caught fire more than he anticipated it would. So he did not have the staff that one would need to build, a full complement of these things, and he has built that staff over the past 2 to 3 years. And so I think we're seeing. I think what you're seeing is the result of that. I mean, I think it really is quite that simple. I mean, there's a reason why he launched his campaign by saying, "What's different this time? We're running to win." And that's the bottom line. And I guess that's all you needed to hear, because you hung up. There you go. This was a fun moment. I love to watch. I'm both. I wonder, why does Howard Schultz deserve to be on television so much? I guess is he official candidate, or is he still in an exploratory committee stage? He's still if I run. I mean, come on, guy. I thought CEOs were supposed to be decisive, right? If this type of wish-washy leadership is what you're going to provide the country. But I do enjoy the fact that it gives the opportunity for him to go around and have a bunch of people build their brand on dunking him. And here's Ollie Velshi, who, it's fun to watch.
Do you get why some people don't really think that you've got all the answers, that you rich guys who are, I don't know who told you that America's bifurcated. Somebody came to you and told you that there's a problem because the rest of America's been living it.
I appreciate you calling me a rich guy, but I grew up in federal, I grew up in the private.
You're a really rich guy.
But I'm self-made, and I built a company that employed over 3 million people over the last 40 years and gave health care ownership.
Can we just go back? You know what I also love about this, too, is like these type of guys. This guy is so handled by consultants that if you look at his right hand, he has been, like, it's as if the vast majority of what this guy has done has been spent in front of the mirror, making sure he doesn't point when he talks. It is the functional equivalent of, people have told me, you've got to get rid of your ums when you do your presentation. And I probably should. But there are techniques in which people use to get rid of those ums. They call it if you listen to Rush Limbaugh. For a politician, particularly one who has nothing to offer, what they focus on is the mannerisms. And this mannerism right here, where you take your hand and you don't point, but you make a semi-loose fist and make sure that your thumb is on top. And that's the way, because all the communications research has shown that people don't like it when you point. So you do this, and he is doing it with his right hand, and it's supposed to be out of camera frame, but I can't help but focus on it. I mean, it's absolutely nothing, but it tells you everything you need to know about this guy.
Absolutely nothing tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know who told you that America's bifurcated. Somebody came to you and told you that there's a problem because the rest of America's been living it.
I appreciate you calling me a rich guy, but I grew up in federal. I grew up in the private.
Now you're a really rich guy.
But I'm self-made, and I built a company that employed over 3 million people over the last 40 years, and gave health care ownership and free college tuition to every employee.
What you get when you rich guys get into the bifurcation conversation that the rest of us have been having for decades.
Yeah, but this is about a lack of leadership and a government of two sides, Democrats and Republicans, who are unwilling to face the issues and solve America's problem. Why do we have a $22 trillion debt? Why do we have a healthcare crisis? Why do we have K through 12 that's not working? Why is our standing in the world not working? Because of both parties' ideology and unwilling to work together. That's why I'm considering running for president.
So why is everybody
to break the
if
system?
That's true, why is Britain bifurcated? Why is France bifurcated? Why is Germany bifurcated? Why were the Arab countries bifurcated? It's not actually about Democrats and Republicans. It's about rich people who don't pay taxes, who don't understand that it's not about charity. It's actually about wealth distribution. Right? Why, if that's your explanation, why is Britain bifurcated?
We now we're going to talk about what's going on.
No, but you're telling me that our bifurcation, economic bifurcation in America is because of Democrats and Republicans not agreeing on policies? Why is Britain bifurcated?
I'm talking about the lack of leadership and understanding of the fiscal responsibility of elected officials to do the right thing for the American people.
So in each case that I just outlined, but that's because that's not the answer in all those countries, and yet the world is bifurcated.
I'm not here talking about all these countries.
But you're saying that the reason we're economically bifurcated is because of Republican and Democrat policies, and I'm telling you it's a global issue of wealth concentration, not actually about political disagreement on policies.
You want to talk about each country? You want to put China up here?
No, but I think we can cut this any way you want, right?
Pause it. Hold on.
That wasn't on the test. That wasn't on the test.
We were not told this was going to be on the test. We were told. No one said we had to know other countries. Nobody said we had to know other countries. I'm sorry. This was not supposed to be on the test. I'm calling my mother right now.
Jesus, is Bill Burr
about political disagreement on policies?
You want to talk about each country? You want to put China up here?
But I think we can cut this any way you want, right? How many rich people in America have the wealth of the bottom half of society? How many rich people in the world have the same wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion in society? Oxfam says it's 28. Under 10.
Listen,
about 28?
I didn't create the policies that we are now under. I'm here to tell you that I am looking at the current situation economically in this country, and if you want to solve the problems, you have to have the kind of leadership that cooperates with one another and is not steeped in ideology.
Okay, then
I'm sure you can
but here's
agree
the
with
issue.
That.
But then
I guess I don't understand how that.
Hey, you know how that works?
But you can go with ideology.
I'm really clear on how economic bifurcation works. I'm concerned
not bifurcation, solving the problem.
Right, but so
Let me ask you
Republicans and Democrats not agreeing is why Germany is bifurcated?
Can I ask you one simple question?
Yeah.
Should we be spending less than we're taking in?
It all depends on it's not a yes or no. It's absolutely not a yes or no question. No, it's really not. If you're in a recession and you need to stimulate the economy and you have got a return on investment. Hold on, let me just you asked me a question.
We're not in a recession.
Right, but the answer in that case might be yes.
Yeah.
So it's not a yes or no question. So suggesting that
how about right now?
That you're taking in.
How about right now? In this moment in time when you just put up these numbers about the economy going so well, should we be spending less than we're taking in?
We have to understand what we're spending.
You don't want to answer the question.
No, I'm actually answering it in a nuanced way that doesn't suggest that there's a simple answer to these complicated questions that plague the world.
Okay, in all fairness, it's not complicated to me.
I understand
when we
that.
have such a robust
It's
economy
so simple.
and we're spending much more than we're taking in. And
oh my God!
You know, he's too dumb and oligarchically insulated to be embarrassed, but that's the most embarrassing thing I've seen in television.
I honestly felt like, wow. I feel like maybe Ali should have said to Stephanie, "You might not want to watch this." Like honestly,
I know
I was
how
looking
you
at her
feel
where she
about
was like,
billionaires.
You
being
may not
humiliated.
want to see what's going to happen with Howard Schultz right now.
Well, I know we're all
Yeah,
mad
this
that
is
Howard
definitely-
Schultz is allowed on television, but just think about it this way as a really good advertisement for the fact that billionaire CEOs could be really stupid.
Like Meghan McCain,
Oh, wait,
Howard
are we really
Schultz.
going to be talking about other countries?
I love that. Excuse me.
Just because
I'm
it
running
in
for
any
president
way
of the
imposes
United States
on my set piece that I've worked on.
Excuse me, I said president of the United States, not president of the France-Britain states.
Right.
This is totally unfair.
I have
You're
a
ambushing me, and this is so mean.
I have a psychological concept you guys might like to hear about. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. In the field of psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people of low ability have illusory superiority and mistakenly assess their cognitive ability as greater than it is. The cognitive bias is illusory superiority comes from the inability of low ability people to recognize their lack of ability. I guess he's a CEO, but without the self-awareness of metacognition, low ability people cannot objectively evaluate their competence.
I didn't know we were talking about metacognition.
The best part is that Stephanie Ruhle, I think next, was going to say, like, wait a second. You're not going to be the leadership of both parties. How will you intend to make these two disparate, polarized groups do what you want them to do?
With an executive order.
As a third-party president with no constituency whatsoever.
You guys, I
an
believe you're.
executive
Excuse
order
me. I'm sorry.
to come together.
We need to be fair here. As much as it's fun to dunk on him, I believe you're missing the empty chair, which symbolizes the unspoken American people or something.
This is just, it really is true. Like the amount of, like when he goes home at night and he's announcing to his family, to the extent that, I don't know if he has one or not, but just, to his dog, like, things went really well for me today. I definitely think I'm really getting the sense I should run because the folks over at blank made me feel good. But like, I mean, if you don't, like you get to like the afternoon show on MSNBC.
Steve Schmidt and Bill Burton while they like raid his fridges. They're just like, oh yeah, it was great. Got any more steaks in here? They're literally just eating their way through.
Howard, let me just tell you, this is actually exactly where you want to be. I would say the best thing that could have happened to you is that Ali Velshi had said that to you. In fact, I would actually, maybe we shouldn't do it another hit soon there, but I'm almost thinking you should do another hit soon there, but probably not. Let's back off because we don't want to go to that well too often. But that was very good for you.
And people don't like unfair stuff. So the way that you were just like, hey, wait a second, man, I'm running for president of America, not you want to talk about France, that's like totally out of left field. That showed a lot of decisive leadership. You won't get pushed around by the press.
Here's the thing, Howard. The thing
Remember
that you did really well there is you made it about America first, but without having to say America first. And that's what was so great about that. I mean, you may have lost the Ali Velshi primary, but you won the primary of the people you can't see.
Dude, oligarchs.
You won the primary of the people not in that chair.
The empty chairs represented in that room who aren't on the set. The oligarchs need to get it together and run Steve Klubeck for president. They need it. an everyman oligarch.
Keep it simple.
Exactly. That's what
infrastructure. No bumps in the road.
That's right.
Howard Schultz isn't able to deliver that.
Wait, now that guy also was saying like
he's saying exactly the same
no,
thing.
but the
he's
point is
saying-
he was saying it 6 months out from the Democratic
midterms.
primary or the midterms,
Right.
where the Democrats did exactly not what he suggested and had the greatest off-year election victory in the history of people recording that.
But he still gets to look like an extra in Showgirls and be cool, and he would be a much better candidate too.
It is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off.
Okay. But that is Howard Schultz, which is more direct, like less filler. Like that's Howard Schultz minus all the like motivational books he's read.
Less standing on ceremony.
This is very encouraging. So here is Barack Obama. Well, the response is encouraging. I just want to remind you, regardless of what you think about Barack Obama, the Democratic Party under the era of Obama was decimated. The 2010 midterm elections were so decisive and destructive. Now, granted, there is a sort of a what they call it, like a secular trend where the party out of the presidency loses. But it was huge losses in 2010. And Obama may not be responsible for that, but the failure of any type of outside apparatus to mitigate that loss is his failure. The Obama administration and the Obama campaign, starting in August of 2007, or 2008, I should say, put the word out to donors, and you can go back and look this up. We were talking about it at the time. Put the word out to donors. You do not donate to outside groups. You donate only to us. And they had Obama for America, which was considered to be a huge grassroots organization that a lot of people felt had an enormous amount of power and had a lot of potential as an outside leverage for the president. And they purposefully buried the entire organization. And they left the Democratic Party. And you can also quote, "I got this," as he's telling Democratic lawmakers in some type of Democratic caucus meeting, "I got this." So he basically said, "No, don't worry. It's on me. We have debilitated all the outside organizations because we don't want any type of dissent. And I got this." And then 2010 happened, and guess what? He didn't got it.
Colby, except not.
So here he is returning to the Hill, not literally, but metaphorically, to tell the Democratic Party what they need to do. Barack Obama was great in telling the Democratic Party what he needed to do to win. But there is no evidence that Barack Obama is the guy to tell Democrats what they need to do to win, particularly not now. But also, the fact is, not then either. And this is, divorced from his policies, just as a political strategist, very good in figuring out what works for Barack Obama, not so good at what works for everybody else in the Democratic Party. The Democrats lost over 1,000 seats in state, local, federal elections.
How's this looking,
over those
Barack
10
Obama wise?
He got it, but not the rest of us. But here he is telling the Democrats what they need to do to, you got to slow your roll now, despite what happened. That's basically the pitch.
On the other hand, I know from experience in passing the health care law that I had to work on in the United States, that was not the ideal healthcare program that I wanted to set up. It's what I could get at the time, and if I could establish the principle that everybody gets healthcare and get 20 million people more healthcare, even if 10 million still hadn't gotten it, that's what I'm going to do now. And then I'll fight some more later for the other 20%. So to go back to the point that was made by Conleth, what's true for me when I was a president or an elected official, it's going to be true for you as well, even within your own organizations. And one of the things I do worry about sometimes among progressives in the United States, maybe it's true here as well, is a certain kind of rigidity where we say, I'm sorry, this is how it's going to be, and then we start sometimes creating what's called a circular firing squad, where you start shooting at your allies because one of them is straying from purity on the issues. And when that happens, typically the overall effort and movement weakens. So I think whether you are speaking as a citizen or as a political leader or as an organizer, whether you're in the nonprofit space and civic space or you're in the political arena, you have to recognize that the way we've structured democracy requires you to take into account people who don't agree with you. And that, by definition, means you're not going to get 100% of what you want. But you should take some time to think in your own mind and continually refine and reflect, what are my core principles? Because the danger is if you don't know what your principles are, that's when you compromise your principles away. So you have to know ahead of time, here's what I'm willing to compromise on, here are the things that I'm not. You can't set up a system in which you don't compromise on anything, but you also can't operate in a system where you compromise on everything.
The problem with Obama's perspective on this is that he may have had core principles, and I frankly, I don't think they were quite ambitious enough, but nevertheless, the point is different people can have different core principles. But when you come in offering the least amount, or you come in offering basically what your compromise position is, in your first offer, you are guaranteed to get less than your compromise position. That is just like a basic tenet of negotiations, and it ends up being, in many respects, it puts into question where the core principles were.
But isn't that the problem? I think the core principles are in the process, not in the outcome.
I think that's true too.
The core principle is negotiation and having everybody at the table. That's the core principle.
He conflates the concept of democracy with the idea of what democracy is supposed to bring about, and so it's really just like he's maintaining that process. I think is a big part of it. Yes, also, and it was not effective. I mean, we got the Affordable Care Act, but there was a lot of reason to presume that something could be done in that space, and he did not exert the effort on various players that he could have. And I would add too that they, in many respects, they sold it incorrectly, because it didn't really make things affordable.
Also, how many people does it take to make a firing squad? Because what this sounds like to me is more like Obama and the establishment Democrats kind of throwing shade on one person in particular. So if anyone's doing a circular firing squad, it's him. And AOC, yeah, but like fewer people, let's say. There are fewer mainstream elected politicians right now that are pushing what Obama is portraying as purity politics and what we understand to be practical, because we've seen market solutions to healthcare and they don't work, right?
Right. I mean, he claims it's a circular firing squad, but the shots are fired from everywhere, not just the supposed purity folks.
I mean, it was his chief of staff that called progressives effing retards.
Right.
Like, what is the,
Wow, he
yeah,
used
what
the
is
R
the, I
word?
mean, that's the other problem too, is like, what is the basis of like where these supposed preset compromises come from? Like, this is where Brad DeLong said a couple of weeks ago,
right,
we need to understand that we're not the point people anymore because we lost.
Right. The purity is on the other foot.
Right.
On some level.
Precisely.
And the practicality is on the other foot. Here is Katie Porter, one of those Democrats who was just elected. She was elected in a what was otherwise a longtime Republican district in California. She, in many respects, she hasn't gotten quite the attention that some of the other freshman Congress people have, but she's gotten some. She was considered a sort of a Elizabeth Warren protege in some respects. Studied with her, I think, at Harvard, and also was heavily involved in the work that was going on in California regarding the financial crisis, or I should say the wake of the financial crisis. And here is her response to Obama's worries about the progressive rigidity hurting Democrats. And I should say that last clip we played of Obama was in Berlin, but he apparently had made a trip sometime last week or the week before to the Hill and delivered a very similar message. Don't be so ambitious.
Agree with the president, former president? I mean, is this a problem among Democrats?
I don't think we should be afraid of ideas and of new ideas. And I think if we're gonna energize the electorate, particularly millennial voters, we shouldn't be shutting down ideas. And so I think to the extent that there's been rigidity, it's been rigidity around the establishment. I'm a freshman. I'm part of a huge freshman class, and we're bringing a lot of new ideas and a lot of new voices to the Congress. And I think there's a certain amount of resistance to that from the establishment. So I think that we should not be afraid of having a dialogue and be afraid of people disagreeing with each other within the Democratic Party. It's only when it turns personal, when it turns to name calling, when it turns to dragging down other candidates, that I think it becomes a problem. But right now, I don't feel like the Congress has done that.
So here's the point that she's making, and it's one that we were just making, is that you have a circular firing squad. And what purity, like the idea is that the so-called center, the so-called moderates, and I say so-called center because there's just no way to say that they're centered, at least in terms of the American public. But the so-called moderates, let's call them just the leftish, rightish leftists in the House, their purity is pretty rigid. It's just a different type of pure. The product is slightly different. And they frame it as if the product is some form of leftism, and we're going to, we don't need it to be so pure. But the fact is that that's not the politics they have, and so they're having purity tests too. It is swaying in any way or diverging from what we have been selling and pushing for an extended period of time. This could be framed exactly the opposite way. But the way Obama does it, and the way that we always hear this done, is as if we are the norm, and they're the different ones. And
we're practical, they're ideological.
Right. We don't have politics. I mean, this is Howard Schultz's pitch too, right? Like I don't have politics. I don't have ideology. I just have can-do spirit and get-it-doneism.
Common sense.
I just have common sense and a get-it-doneism.
I wonder if Dave Rubin's going to do a hashtag walk back after hearing Katie Porter talk about ideas.
Yeah, there you go.
Whoa, Katie Porter's interested. Hey, here's an idea. What if Equifax releasing information to the public was a good thing?
The way that Katie Porter frames it is also really the way to do it, too. Because she's using basically their language for the most
I agree.
part.
And it's accurate. It's absolutely.
Accurate.
It's like actually, if you go to the progressive side of that equation, that is where people are generating ideas that are not reheated 80s and 90s plans that are completely historically out of date, unnecessarily convoluted, repetitive, and uninteresting to normal people. Speaking of appealing to normies, ironically.
Physician, heal thyself.
NBC News is reporting that the U.S. Secret Service director is out. Not sure what that's about. Maybe part of the Department of Homeland Security, but I'm not sure exactly why.
Spot opened up for Bongino.
You get the sense that like somebody in the White House going like, let's see if we can have every single person in the administration be acting. Like, let's not have anybody that is actually doing the job like in a permanent way. Let's go to Tim Ryan launching his campaign in Ohio. This is a very odd pitch, it seems to me. But did this happen this weekend? Yes. Yep. The amount of news this guy gets is not very much.
Didn't he announce it on The View? He had a View spot.
I feel like maybe he did, but here it is. Here's Tim Ryan making his pitch as to why he should be president.
Into our social media, and they intentionally.
All right, pause it. Got to go back. It's you cut off the part. He's talking about Russia went into our social media.
Into our social media, and they intentionally try to divide us. If there is an incident, and I want everyone to listen to me here. If there is an incident in America that's controversial about kneeling for the national anthem, or there's a school shooting, or there's an incident between a cop and a kid, you know who comes on to our social media? The Russians. Okay, I want you to hear this. The Russians. They come into our social media and they spin things to get us into these divided camps.
Man, I have a theory about this.
Wow.
Now, people don't quite get what's going on here. But I don't know, because maybe it's because you're too young. But Bob Uecker, who I believe was a player for Cleveland at one point, was famous for being this type of agitator in the context of light beer from Miller. He would get in between people who thought it was tasted great or it was less filling, and then he would start arguments all around the country. This was happening. Bob Uecker was involved. And that's what Tim Ryan is suggesting, that there is absolutely no disagreement on things like Black Lives Matter or things
you
like...
should have seen the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association meeting in Moscow, where the Ferguson cops were just like, I don't want to bother members of our community. I don't want to harass black teenagers and terrorize communities into paying fines to subsidize the rich part of town. That's not what my job's about. You will kill black teenagers. You will get no new squad card.
But I got
we will
very,
do a very mean,
very
dank
aggravating
meme
meme on Instagram. And I'm like, I'm out there now with the tanks.
If you don't do this, we will meme police department out of existence. Snapchat, Instagram, both. I think Ryan actually is a Glenn Greenwald fan. He's trying to set the tables before we run the interview on Tuesday.
I was going to say,
there really are people this insane and demented who have taken this lesson.
There's no doubt that there are people this insane, demented, but it also proves my point. Like Tim Ryan,
what actually does shock me though is like, here's a guy. I mean, he wouldn't be my candidate, obviously, but like he represents a blue collar district in Ohio. He actually has some decent-ish stuff on like labor and blue collar issues, and he easily could just say like, guys, you got to win Ohio and you got to have a labor message that isn't too ambitious or alien. Like I'm saying, like you could write a script of a super credible argument for him, and he's doing this. Like,
well,
what?
Maybe he also knows that that Russia stuff actually plays the best with those type of folks. And
that could be true.
I think that like
maybe he has internal poem.
We have talked.
That.
We have. Yeah. I mean, we have talked in the past where, I think guys like Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp come from very red states. Heitkamp not so much anymore, but that in many respects, the idea of this Russian narrative, I think, gave them some latitude in which to vote against the president's priorities because it resonated with their sort of like red state mentality.
America have no internal problem, racism, and nothing. What we going to do? Make a Facebook post, and then they will get mad.
I have no
Turned
doubt.
into Cartman at the end.
Stupid Americans.
I have no doubt that
know what Cartman
that there
sounds like.
are people on Twitter, who just try and instigate. But I think that if that becomes in your opening statement of your presidential run, I feel like you're not being super ambitious.
I used to read Alice Walker. Then I got on this dank meme page.
I just
Now
realized
support Donald Trump.
I didn't notice this at first, but Colin Kaepernick went to Moscow University for college ball.
Right, exactly. I also what an incredible, did he actually conflate NFL protests with school shootings as just controversial?
There's controversial things.
Controversy. NFL players taking a stand against police murders of black people.
You know
and,
what else might
schools being shot up. I thought actually,
but I'm curious as to what side.
That's
because
InfoWars shit.
I thought schools being shot up was one of the last places of controversy in this country.
No, he was talking about
Alex
unarmed black
Jones.
people getting shot. I think he said.
No, he said school shootings.
But I'm curious as to what he thinks. Where is he on these issues? Because I remember when the president of the United States weighed in on Colin Kaepernick, and can't help but think that the Russian bot army, to the extent that they exist on Twitter, was not as effective as pushing this narrative as, say, Donald Trump and the entire U.S. media.
It's the same thing. Donald Trump was like, all right, I need to send out a unifying message that condemns the historic stain of racism.
No, you will not. See you in Helsinki.
Yeah, right.
You will condemn Colin Kaepernick.
Is there a limit to how many people can run for president at once?
This is
Because I
Jonathan
feel like
Shane
we're
stuff.
approaching
It
it.
goes back to the Central Park Five as a Russian operation.
Did he say that? No.
No.
But I like that you thought it was.
I like that you thought it was conceivable.
I didn't read that piece, but it's not completely.
No, it's totally
Nothing
impossible.
would surprise me at this point.
What Ta-Nehisi Coates doesn't get is that the Russians did that.
Let's go. Larry Kudlow is out there, and they are right now. The president is contemplating.
He's looking better.
He's contemplating, still contemplating Stephen Moore, who is the right-wing hack, deadbeat dad, which should not preclude you, I understand, from being on the Fed and managing money and whatnot. But his hackery, I think, is enough to keep him off. Or Herman Cain, who do we have that smoking ad? Did you post that? No. Herman Cain, who apparently is worried that he's not going to be able to sustain the vetting to get on to the Fed. But here is, and I can't quite understand why they can't find anybody else, but I think it's just like, we're going to put a movement conservative on the Fed. And I don't know what the theory is in the White House as to why they would do these guys, other than I want somebody who's a complete crony. And maybe there's a lot of people who are like, can't bring themselves to pretend like they're a crony of Trump that would also be suitable for the Fed. I don't know. But here is Larry Kudlow saying that it's sort of trying to, I guess, carry water for these two.
You were not, but let me ask you about Stephen Moore. He was a contributor here at CNN. He's clearly qualified to talk about the economy on cable television.
You're the first guy to say that, Jake. You're so even-handed.
But take a listen to what he said about his qualifications to serve on the Fed board.
I'm kind of new to this game, frankly, so I'm going to be on a steep learning curve myself about how the Fed operates, how the Federal Reserve makes its decisions.
He's going to be on a steep learning curve about how the Fed operates and how the Federal Reserve makes its decisions. This is one of the most qualified candidates in the country?
Yes, he's a smart guy, a really smart guy. There's nothing wrong with a little modesty or a little humility. You learn the ropes. Pretty much every job I've had down through the years, you have to learn. We're both broadcasters. I had to learn to do it. I don't know, maybe you were born into it. We all have to learn to do it. Yeah. I think Steve is being very humble about this. Again.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Do we really want someone with a steep learning curve?
I had to learn to run this board. When
That's
I started
true.
Here.
That's true.
I'd never really done something that
Right.
like that
Stakes not quite as high.
Sometimes I left Michael's mic down.
That's true, and I would argue, like, if we had introduced this board on day one, I think probably nothing would have ever happened, right? Like, you had to learn the other board first.
Stages.
Yeah.
Just imagine being so privileged that you don't need to have qualifications for the job before you start doing the job.
I mean, steep learning curve, trying to figure out how the Fed works. It seems to me to be a little bit, you might want to put them like in the JV team for a while. Or
Yeah, like there's a curve and then there's a cliff.
The best part of that, though, is Jake Tapper trying to skirt over the past that they had him as an economics advisor on CNN for years.
Right. Well, he's good enough to talk about it.
Yeah, apparently.
And to completely mislead the country about it. Unbelievable.
There are people with college degrees who can't get a job at Starbucks right now.
Well, there's a big learning curve. All right, let's take one more phone call. Sorry, folks. I know we've got a lot of people who've been hanging on for, well, all these folks, 83 minutes. Calling from a 530 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hold on.
Hello?
Hello, hold on a second.
Well, probably not. You there?
I'm so difficult.
Okay, I'm going to have to go now. I'm sorry.
Wait, come on, man. Been waiting for an hour and a half.
Okay, well, so what? So talk.
Hang up quick.
Okay, I was trying to take you off speakerphone. So, I haven't listened for a while, but is it too early to talk about 2020? I haven't.
All right, what would you like to...
I hope this is a troll.
All right, what would you like to say about 2020?
Are the Pats going to win?
Are the Pats going to win?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Appreciate the phone call.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Do you mean that literally or metaphorically?
Oh, he's gone. Calling from a 605 area code. You are the final call of the day.
Hi, this is Paul from South Dakota.
Paul from South Dakota. What's on your mind?
So, I've in the whole Democratic misguided strategy, I think, from establishment Democrats to win over quote unquote moderate Republicans for 2020. Sorry, I'm also talking about 2020, but it's going to be a little more substantive. They're really pushing, of course, their types of candidates. And one of the main talking points I've seen, especially with Buttigieg and Beto, is, wouldn't it be nice to have, a decent man in the White House, like someone who can speak in complete sentences, which, yes, admittedly is nice, but that's not really the point. But I was just thinking, I was at work this weekend, and I had a couple customers in line, two grown adults who were a couple, at least in their 40s, literally talking to each other, saying, hey, did you see, the new meme that Trump tweeted out this week? And I'm just thinking, wow, if you really think you're going to win over these people by saying, wow, this is a nice, decent man, no. That's why they like Trump, is because he tweets out dumb memes. They don't care about anything else.
No one cares about that nerd stuff.
So I don't get why that's the thing. I was joking, actually, Michael's Nation of Islam Obama would probably be the person, because it'd be their establishment policies, but he'd be a little bit more overt in his rhetoric.
I mean, I think...
Don't keep your name out of my fucking mouth.
I think there are people...
Vice versa.
I think there are people like those two people who came into your business, without a doubt, who voted for Trump. I do think that there are people who, certainly within the Democratic Party, and I would imagine there's some in the Republican Party, maybe less, frankly, who definitely the idea of not having to engage with politics and just sort of saying, we got someone decent in the White House, decent, like not like decent as in like he's a decent human being, like an actual human being in the White House, and that's enough. And I know broadly speaking that they're going to do politics that are like broadly aligned with mine. Certainly to the extent that I dig into what is happening, I'm not going to be upset. I think that's an appealing message to at least a portion of the Democratic Party. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I think from the center to the left, there is I think a fairly sizable amount of people who are just like, I just want to elect someone who I think is a decent human being, and they're just going to go and not be corrupt and just take care of things. And that's why, I mean, Barack Obama was a hugely popular president with Democrats. And frankly, pretty popular amongst the American public. And I think to a large extent for that reason. I mean, I haven't seen specific data on this, but I bet that if you were to poll the people who really like Obama, that they wouldn't necessarily point to specific policies or issues as much as they would as like decent guy, good guy, smart guy. There would all be these qualities that were, nice. And so I understand I understand why they are running that way. I think it's not, it's conceivable to me that could beat Donald Trump too. Like, I don't think that Donald Trump is this sort of like.
It didn't work last time though.
Well, no, but last time you had a candidate who had 30 years of baggage.
Yeah.
You had a candidate who was under investigation, rightly or wrongly, by the FBI.
Yep.
You had a candidate that was, there was a whole, there's not just one thing that sunk Hillary Clinton.
But the caller's talking about specifically peeling off Republicans, right?
Well, I don't think that there is, a peeling off Republicans. I mean, if you want to talk about sort of the broad, like.
Oh, I agree.
The broad.
But that's their strategy, it seems like.
Well, that's what that is what they say in
and
the
I just think that's
Democratic.
a bad thing.
I agree. I think like that's the Joe Biden strategy too, right?
I think we all agree on that. But I agree with the caller in general that there is a subset of people that are way too, and whatever, all kidding aside, of course, like capacity to like think and problem solve obviously matters. But like there is particularly amongst the media class, and I do think this is part of the reason that there's so much juice around, Buddha gig or whatever, is just this innate obsession with credentialism and testing well. And I think it's societally hugely unhealthy and also not interesting for normal people.
Yeah.
For normies, including not just Republicans. And I think for what it's worth, Biden's not playing that angle.
Oh, Biden.
I agree. I disagree. I agree with you about a broader critique of Biden's approach, but I think Biden is correct in that sense of like you go out and you
Biden's
talk.
Biden's playing the same. The two broad categories we're talking about here is like persuade people who voted for Trump versus find people who didn't go out to vote.
Definitely.
Those are the two sort of like electoral strategies that are broadly, when you strip out ideology and whatnot from, and how you would achieve either one of those, tactics on either side. Those are the two broad strategic decisions that you can see in the context of this election. And there are people who are, maybe even to the right of, like, say, Buttigieg, I don't know for sure, but who are in the more mobilization camp versus the persuasion camp. I mean, you can cut up these people in various ways, and the persuasion camp is the one that I think like gets the most sort of like play from the establishment, broadly speaking, because that usually requires a smaller parameters of policy options. And it's really just more about like how you're going to appeal culturally and this and that. But
I have a few issues with this strategy, actually. Like you're talking about persuasion versus turnout. And I think usually it's more turnout than persuasion. like we've been saying, the media gives an inordinate amount of importance to this small slice of swing voters. And if you want to look at the number of people who don't vote, it's just more people at the end of the day. And it's also more working class people and people of color who, sorry, I care about a little bit more than people who voted for Trump.
Same here.
And but even like the moral issue aside, there's just more of them. But let's say that there is a slice of swing voters who are working class, mostly but not all white, who can be persuaded to swing from Republican to Democrat, because we've seen it happen before. You're not going to get those people on social issues, because the majority of people in this country are either socially liberal or socially conservative, and they're fiscally centrist to liberal, because most people in this most working class people in this country understand the need for stuff like labor rights and, health care.
Could I give you my own personal history on my political? It'll be real quick.
You know what?
So I'm 21
Honestly,
years old.
Listen, I'm sorry. I got to go.
It's
2:40.
Okay,
I
well,
get it. I'm doing a pre-tape. What's that?
Call back.
Call back.
Okay.
Appreciate the call. All right, folks. Sorry. Got a lot of people hanging on the phone. Got to go. Got to do a pre-tape for...
Excited about the pre-tape. Is it a good one?
Jonathan Baller of the New York Times, who's done this massive, massive story on the Murdochs.
Oh, that actually does sound super good.
All right, folks. No.
For us?
No, for Majority Report in the coming weeks.
Final
Tomorrow
IM?
on this program, Glenn Greenwald and I had a conversation on Friday. We will play it in the first half of the show. Michael will do the fun half. See you tomorrow.
It might take all I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101